Rasulullah. Welcome everyone. It's great to be back with everyone. Great to be back with everyone. Inshallah, everybody had a good break. Welcome everyone to the Friday Forum. For those that don't know, Friday Forum is a weekly event that happens on Friday nights where we discuss current topics in terms of young adults and current topics and hot issues. So, alhamdulillah, tonight we have a couple of special guests who will be talking about the political achievements and advancements of the Muslim community. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements. Alhamdulillah, some of the programs are going to be we're going to be starting up some of the programs at the masjid. We have a new class, the Ulum al-Quran class with Sheikh Osama. It'll be Sundays at 6 p.m. It'll be on site, inshallah. It won't be this Sunday, but the following Sunday, January 15th. Again, it's going to be on Sundays at 6 p.m. And we also have a new Basics of Islam class for new Muslims. That class will start, inshallah. It'll be on Saturdays at 6 p.m. and it will start on January 21st, inshallah. Before we get started with the program, I just wanted to introduce our special guest. Alhamdulillah, we have Brother Abdullah, who is a youth change maker. He's currently residing in New York City. He serves as the United Nations Youth Ambassador to the United States, where he represents young people all across the country. Alhamdulillah, he's also set to graduate with his double bachelor's degree in political science and in international relations in May, and he also plans to attend law school in the fall, inshallah. And we also have Sister Medina, who is from Newark, New Jersey. She graduated from New York University, Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service, where she earned her Master's of Public Administration in Public and Nonprofit Management and Policy. She has worked with various lawmakers, including Governor Phil Murphy and others, including Bill de Blasio. She's currently serving as the Government Affairs Manager at CAIR, where she handles cair-nj Jersey advocacy, legislative, and public policy portfolio. So inshallah, they are here going to be discussing the various political achievements in 2022. So with that, we will turn it to our guests.
Shukran, can everybody hear me? Alhamdulillah. All righty. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi Bali Sadri wa Sali Amri Walil Yukadin min Lisani Yafkali. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. This is my first time being at ICPC-Clifton. Thank you for having me. So today's topic, we're going to be doing the Friday Forum Part 1 on the 2022 political advancements of the Ummah and the path forward. This is something that's very exciting to me because, as you know, I'm a policy wonk. So a little bit about myself. So Brother Ibrahim has introduced myself. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, by way of Burkina Faso, West Africa. I'm an alumni of NYU. Prior to starting my position at CAIR, I achieved my Master's of Public Administration at NYU, as well as my Bachelor's of Arts and Sociology at the College of New Jersey. And as the Government Affairs Manager, I handle CAIR's advocacy, legislative, and public policy portfolios. And I engage lawmakers, advocate for public policy changes on the state and federal levels. And I also partake in coalition building and educate community members on the importance of civic engagement, which I'm here today to do. Alrighty. So what's on the agenda? We already went through introductions. We're going to get into some very critical and important definitions. So, election definitions. A lot of times when, folks are watching the news, we hear a lot of different terminology, and it's not always very clear what that terminology means. So I'm here to break it down a little bit for you all so you can kind of better understand it. So first and foremost, primary election. So what exactly is a primary election, and what does closed mean? So essentially, a primary election is an election in which select candidates are essentially running for a political party's ticket. So you have both a Republican and a Democrat running for a specific party ticket. So whether it's the president, whether it's a senator, whether it's a congresswoman, a congressman, mayor, that would fall under the primary election. And essentially, within the state of New Jersey, we have something called a closed primary election. And essentially what that means is that only registered voters of a particular party can vote in these elections to select the candidate that will run and eventually win that office. So say, for instance, if you're not affiliated with either being a Republican or Democrat, you wouldn't be able to vote in the primary election in this state because it's closed. You have to affiliate yourself with either party in order to participate in this type of election. And here within the state of New Jersey, it's very important to understand that every first Tuesday after the first Monday in June is our primary election time. Now, this is important to know because every state has a different date with their primary elections, but we only are concerned with the state of New Jersey because we live in New Jersey. And usually for New Jersey, the polls, they open at 6 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. This is done so folks are able to go either before they go to work or they're able to go after they go to work. Because as you know, folks want to be as fair as possible, so as many people are able to, cast their ballot and vote. So, general election. This is also another term that a lot of people hear oftentimes, and it can be quite confusing if you're not like, a political wonk. So essentially, a general election is an election where most of all members of the nation's legislative body are chosen. So essentially, this is when you're going to be voting for your U.S. congressperson, your U.S. senator, your governor, your lieutenant governor, sometimes your mayor, sometimes your state assembly person, sometimes your state assembly senator. So this is a time when everybody is running, and this is when the selection of who's going to be the top two people to run against each other to win that election, to get into that seat. And the general election here in New Jersey is usually the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So this is usually the election in which you're voting, where you're selecting who is actually going to fill that seat for that specific office. Oftentimes this is associated with the president. So as you know, November, you see November, you're like, oh, it's time to vote for the president. Not yet, 2024. Polls are open from 6 a.m. again to 8 p.m. They want to be as cognizant of folks' time as possible and give people the opportunity to get to the polls. So, midterm election. Now, midterm election is often interchangeably used with the term general election, and it can be a little tricky, I can understand. So essentially, the midterm election is used to elect a range of federal, state, and local offices in the years when the presidential election is not up for re-election. So essentially, because currently there is no presidential election, we currently went through the midterm election. So in 2024, when there is going to be another presidential election, it's just going to be a general election. It's not going to be considered the midterm election. And usually this is when we're electing U.S. state senators and House of Representatives. As you know, all U.S. state senators and House of Representative members were up for election in this past election. So we were in the midterm elections. Also, the governor, sometimes and lieutenant governors are also running in midterm elections. In this state, we didn't have a governor or lieutenant governor race because we recently had one not too long ago. And sometimes mayors are also up for election, or those on the municipal and local level. As you probably saw in your own townships, you had council people running, mayors, board of education folks, and et cetera. So it's very important to know the difference between these terms because they can seem the same, but they're very different. And then lastly, we have a special election. And the special election is very important because this is an election that is not a general or primary election. So essentially, special elections happen when we're trying to fill a vacancy for a specific office. Oftentimes this happens because an elected official has resigned, sometimes, someone's been impeached or taken out of office, or somebody has become ineligible to run, or sometimes, sickness happens. But essentially this is an election to fill a vacancy when a vacancy opens in that specific office. And special elections can also be held regarding school referendums. So when it comes to specific policies that our school district is voting on, like whether they should cancel statewide testing or something of that nature, special elections are also held in that regard as well. And this is just a nice little graphic just to show you a little bit of cross comparison of New Jersey compared to other states. So essentially, if you look at the map, New Jersey here, our X essentially is this state's open to unaffiliated voters. So essentially, this is regarding the primary, general, special elections as comparison to other states throughout the United States. And you'll see different X's because it depends on whether, it's closed, partially open, open to unaffiliated voters, and what have you. So it's just really great information to know because, again, it can be extremely a lot to take in. So it's very good to know some of the most basic information. Now, we're in New Jersey, so let's focus on New Jersey for a little bit. So, New Jersey has at least 40 Muslims serving in elected office as of now. And that's huge because we're leading the way and we're paving the way for political representation on the local level nationwide. So we should be really, really proud of ourselves as a state, as an Ummah, and as a community. Additionally, in 2021, for those who aren't aware, I'm pretty sure you all aware because you're here today, so that means you're politically informed. We elected the first ever Muslim members to the New Jersey State Legislature, as you probably know, Assemblywomen Jaffer and Hyder, LD 16 and LD 37. Is anyone from their districts here? Make some noise? No? Oh, well. Still, congratulations nonetheless. And then also, for those who weren't aware, Assemblywoman Jaffer was also previously elected as the first Muslim woman mayor in the United States, not just in New Jersey, but in the United States. So that's really, really, really big for both New Jersey and for, herself and just the Ummah in general. And also, 2/3 of all New Jersey Muslims were elected post the Trump, administration, and this was due to a surge in activism and civic involvement. Again, CAIR is 501c34. We're not politically aligned with any party, but just a point to make for those who are here. Additionally, for those who also aren't aware, New Jersey has the most Muslims per percentage in the United States, 3%, compared to the nation's 1%. So again, New Jersey's leading the way in a lot of different ways, so we should be proud of ourselves as a state. In addition to that, according to the 2020 ballot, in New Jersey, 22 Muslims ran in elections, which was the second highest total after Minnesota. So as you see, we are continuing to make a lot of advancements in this state in the political arena on the national stage, not just on the state level. And then lastly, in the past 4 years, more than 500 Muslim Americans ran for the office of, different political offices nationwide, and over 100 of those included New Jersey. So again, we're doing really great things here in the state, and we have a lot of people who are politically involved and doing their best to be civically engaged. Additionally, New Jersey Muslim community members have continued to win races for mayors, council members, school board commissioners, and a lot of people in our community are actually holders of this office, so this is something that's very important to know. The state currently has Muslim mayors in East Orange and Prospect Park, which you will see later on the presentation, which is also something really great. And previously, the mayors of Teaneck, Baskin Ridge, and Montgomery were Muslim as well. And lastly, for the number of black Muslims who have served in the New Jersey government, there has been many over the last few decades, including our good brother, Jimmy Small, who was an East Orange councilman from 1994 to 2002 and a school board member from 1987 to 1993. So as you can see, our Ummah is not only just very diverse, but we're doing a lot of different things in this state. Now, let's get to some graphics. I know I talk a lot, and I know folks want to be a little bit more engaged with some pictures, so I want to give you some visuals to look at. So this is the Directory of American Muslim Elected Officials in October of 2022, as of October of 2022. And our national arm, CAIR National, put this really great resource together. Just forewarning, we are in the process of updating this, but these are some of the individuals that have won over the years. So as you can see on the nationwide map, New Jersey is a star here. We're 40 in comparison to all the other states. Michigan is trying to, reach our level, but they're not there yet. And, we have other states who are, doing their best to continue to get some representation. But as you can see, New Jersey is really a leader, and we're really a game changer here. So that's really, really great, alhamdulillah. And as I mentioned, we've had a lot of different elected officials. Some of these people in this PowerPoint you might be very familiar with. Mayor Kadallah, everybody knows Mayor Kadallah, you know, Assemblywoman Shamer Hyder, City Council Member Hussein, City Council Member, you know, Mustafa, City Council Member Ala Abdul Aziz, Sadaf Jaffer, Assemblywoman, and a bunch of other folks. So this is just a slide to really get you familiarized with the faces and the names of the people who are in our community who are, you know, currently in these seats. So it's very important for us to know who they are. Again, more members here. You know, we have City Council Man Khalik. We have, you know, City Councilman Muhammad, and a bunch of other folks who I've had the pleasure of getting to meet while I've joined the team at CAIR, and who are constantly frequenting various different masajid, mosque, Islamic centers, and various other places throughout the state. So you definitely want to get to know them. They have a lot of institutional knowledge. Again, more pictures of our community members who are also political officials. Also some more, we have some sisters also. Give it up for the sister representation. Oftentimes, you know, a lot of times people aren't really aware of the women who are in these roles, so it's very important to also give them face time and make them aware that Muslim women are also doing a lot of great things in the community. It's not just the brothers. And then we have some more members, and we actually have one member from our team, Brother Dia, who is a board member. So again, we have a lot of different representation throughout the state, and it just is continuing to, you know, put us on the national stage. And we have a lot of young folks, a lot of folks from various different racial, ethnic demographics, because New Jersey is also very diverse, so that's also really good. So let's talk about the national stage. New Jersey is also doing good things, but the nation is also doing great things. And as, you know, a state, we are a part of the nation. So in 2022, 145 Muslim Americans ran. As you can see, there were 48 on the state level, 23 also on the legislative level. There were more than 80 Muslim officials who won across the board, and that was locally, statewide, federal, and judicially in over 20 states. So that's a really, really big deal. This is the most political representation that we've had ever. So this is meaning that we're continuing to do the work to get more involved civically. And as you can see, as of 2020, there were 71. So we had a net total of over 10 seats. So that's really, really good. Additionally, 20 Muslim incumbents were successfully reelected, and then there were more new Muslim candidates who won their campaign. So not only were people who are already in office reelected, but folks who just ran for office, they also got reelected. So that's also really good. And again, 2022 was not only historic for the Muslim community overall, it was also historic for Muslim women. A lot of Muslim women won, and that was really, really good. 61% of Muslim women candidates won, compared to only 56% of Muslim men. So, you know, we're, as an Ummah, doing really, really good, but the sisters are also, you know, doing really great. So that's really, really good. And a few just, you know, statistics here. In certain states, there were elections of the first Muslims, Washington State, for example, California, Pennsylvania. And again, as I attested to ethnic diversity, as you know, our Ummah is very, very ethnically diverse and racially diverse. There were people from various different backgrounds, including Somali, Pakistani, Afghan, Indian, and Palestinian. So for those who represent those communities here, you know, kudos to you. And again, some more information about, you know, first Muslim legislators. Maine, Illinois, Ohio, Texas, all had their first Muslim state legislators, which is a really big deal. A lot of pressure, but a big deal nonetheless. Georgia as well. They actually now have the second highest number of Muslim state legislators in the nation, which is a huge deal because, you know, that's really unheard of. But this also matters because this couldn't be done without people who paved the way. And for those who aren't aware, there were higher profile Muslim political officials who helped, you know, lift as they climbed. And that one was Keith Ellison, who was the former congressman. He's now the Minnesota Attorney General. Andre Carson, he's still currently a congressman from Indiana. We all know Ilhan Omar from Minnesota and Sister Rashida Tlaib of Michigan as the first Muslim woman to serve in Congress. So these are some of the people on the national stage who have kind of opened the doors for folks on the local stage to keep, you know, making feats and keep gaining ground, which is really, really good. And again, I talk a lot, so I like to, balance it with some graphics and visually stimulate you all. So as you see, these are some of the pictures of the folks who won. And for those who aren't aware of these people, it's really great to, get to know them. You can follow them on social media, you can follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and see some of the work that they're doing. A lot of them actually just recently got sworn in this week. And it was really lovely to see on Instagram and on Twitter. A lot of them were, swearing over the Quran, family Qurans that were passed down from generations, which were really, really great. As you can see, a lot of different diversity throughout, which is really, really good. More folks throughout the nation, young, old, black, white, Arab, Middle Eastern, North African, everybody, honestly. It's a really huge win for not just the Ummah, but also for the United States and for the state. More people. And these were folks essentially who were the first in their state. So this was actually even bigger because not only did they win, but they were the first people to do it. So this is a huge amount of pressure that's also on their shoulders. But, they're up for the challenge and they're hoping to continue to push their communities forward as well as the Ummah forward as they are, now taking office. Some more individuals from different states. Some more individuals from different states. More individuals. More. And these are some individuals who won on the local level, because a lot of times when we talk about politics, we oftentimes only care about the president or U.S. senator or U.S. congressperson, but it's important to care about the local people too, because these are the people who are most directly impacting us on a day-to-day basis. So it's also important to highlight them as well. And these sisters are some people who won on the more local level, which is really huge deals also for their communities and the community overall. Now, the political state of the Ummah. Very important. This was part of the slide title. So as of 2020, the number of Muslim registered voters have continued to increase. And this is really, really huge, because when we're registered to vote, that means that we're being civically engaged, and that means that our voices are being heard. And the percentages have increased in various different states. Now, I mentioned that New Jersey has a percentage of 3% Muslims in this state, but nationwide it's only 1.3% of Muslims in the U.S. population. So as you can see, again, New Jersey is still a big leader. Also, Pennsylvania, our close neighbor, helped elect, the current senator who defeated actually a Muslim candidate for U.S. senator. And then 70 Muslims now serve in the president's administration, which is huge because that's not usually something that has happened over the years. Now, I want to talk about some organizations in the community in New Jersey and also on a national scale that are doing a lot of great things. As you know, we're CAIR. You're all probably familiar with CAIR. I already went into this spiel about, who I am and what I do. But CAIR is one of the major key players in this state that works in a professional capacity on not only civil rights, but government affairs work, communications, and different strategies to help advance the Ummah and help protect and defend our rights, which is really, really, really great. So if you don't know, you can check us out at the table in the back. Also, we have a lot of great other organizations in the state that also do a lot of great work and who have been doing great work for a long time. New Jersey Muslim Voice for Progress, NJMVP, as well as the Muslim League of Voters, LVNJ. A lot of acronyms, which I won't get into them. They're tongue twisters. American Muslims for Democracy, as well as ICNA, Council for Social Justice. And we also have Muslim organizations on the national stage that are doing a lot of great things as well. Obviously, our national arm, CAIR, that you probably all are familiar with, Jetpack Resource Center, which a lot of those images on the national stage came from. If you don't follow them already, you should. They are really, really informative and keep us up to date with a lot of political progress happening. Empower Change, Empower Action, founded by our good sister, Linda Sarsour. Many of you might be already familiar with her, great Palestinian sister. Engage, as well as Polygon, Muslim Advocates, and a bunch of other organizations, as well as the Georgia Muslim Project, the Muslim Civic Coalition, and a bunch of others, and many, many more. As you can see, there are a lot of people in this space doing a lot of great work trying to help advance us politically, and a lot of them who are trying to get us civically engaged. So it's really, really important that we do our best also to work with these organizations and, support them as they're supporting us. Now, the path forward. Now, this slide is the way to get engaged. Stay informed. So essentially what that means is Keep up with the news, watch podcasts, follow elected officials on social media, engage with them on social media. It's very easy in this day and age to get informed. We all are on social media for the most part. We're all inundated with the who's every day. So definitely get informed and try your best to understand what is going on. Also, vote. But not just vote. Check your voter registration status. That's very important because a lot of times people wait until it's time for an election to try to go and vote, and then they realize that they're not even registered to vote. And then at that moment, it's too late. So check your voter registration status. After you check your voter registration status, then register to vote. After you register to vote, then go vote. But don't just only go vote. Encourage your family, your friends, your kin, people in your life to also go and vote. It's very important that everybody is civically engaged. Obviously, if you're eligible to do so, definitely utilize that right. Contact your local representatives. I promise they don't bite. I work with them, and they really don't, which is really great. You can contact them through various different means. You can call them, you can write them letters, you can send them emails, whichever is your preferred form of communication. They're there to serve you. You put them into the office. They shouldn't be scary to you. Get to know them, demand things, they're working for you. You are their constituents, Attend meetings. This is also very, very important. There's also a lot of meetings that are happening on the state and local level. You have city council meetings, school board meetings, town halls. Attend as many as you can. This is not only a way to network and get to know your representatives and other like-minded individuals in the community, but it's also a way to understand what is going on in the community. Oftentimes at these meetings, you're made privy to a lot of different things that are going on, whether it be zoning ordinances that affect the masajid in your community, whether it's going to be able to get built or not. This is important information to know, so going to these meetings help you get access to that. Also, volunteer. I can't say this enough. Volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. I see a lot of young faces in the house, which is great. This is an opportunity to get job opportunities, internship opportunities, get to know and network with people. Oftentimes, you can volunteer on a campaign. You can, volunteer as an intern. You can volunteer as a fellow. There's so many opportunities to get access to get to know people and to get job opportunities to network and just elevate yourself professionally and academically. So take advantage of those opportunities. And lastly, run for office. Now, obviously, not everybody wants to be a public servant, and that's okay. I like being a private citizen myself as well. However, it's also an opportunity to get involved. If you want to see the change that, you want to see in the world for yourself and for others, this is a great opportunity to run and, be that change maker. And folks shouldn't be scared. There's often a lot of different opportunities to run for office. You don't have to be the president. You don't have to be a senator or a congressperson, even a mayor. You can be a board of education member, a city council member, whomever. We're probably looking at the next president right now. So, it's a really great opportunity to just, get yourself informed. And in closing, essentially, Muslims are a rapidly growing demographic in the United States. Like, I'm 27. As I've gotten older, I've seen it with my own eyes. When my parents first immigrated here, there was nobody. Now there's masajid on every corner, alhamdulillah, So we need as many Muslim Americans to help lead for our political representation for our communities. But don't forget, just because they're Muslim doesn't necessarily mean they're going to represent our community. It's very important to understand what people's philosophies and ideologies are as well, because representation matters, but also policy matters as well. So always be informed about who you're voting for. Also, we need these Muslim leaders to communicate our needs on levels and in rooms in which we are not always present. We can do our best to contact people, but they need to be there to speak for us sometimes. If our voices are not heard, we're not in the picture. We need to be at the table. And also, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So thank you all so much for listening to me. This is my contact information. I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me. This is my number. I have business cards as well. Feel free. If you have questions about internship opportunities, what have you, advice, and we'll take questions and feedback later with the Slido. Thank you so much. Shukran. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Medina. There was one question that came up. Is it okay if we ask that question now?
Oh, yes, I'll say.
Sure. There was one person that asked they personally don't believe in using political means to enact change, and they just wanted to know why they should get involved in politics.
Oh, that's a heavy question.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take it, Abdullah, or would you like to?
I'll add on to it.
Okay. So I can understand. It's very easy to be politically dejected in this day and age with everything going on, but we have to be cognizant of the folks who fought for us to get these rights that we have today. You know, as a black Muslim, specifically a black African Muslim who parents immigrated here, we pay a lot of homage to the black American community who have, you know, paved the way in the civil rights movement for us to be able, as immigrants and as fellow people of color, to be able to vote, to be able to have our voices heard. We don't want to take that privilege for granted. There's so many people also on a global scale who don't even have the right to vote, who don't have the right to make their voices heard. So I know how hard it can be to believe in the process, but the process is real, and elections have consequences. We saw with our own eyes. So definitely do your best to, you know, do it for the sake of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. If for anybody, do it for the sake of Allah, and do it for our community, because it is important and your voice matters.
Definitely, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, Sister Medina. I'll jump right into that question, but assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri, wa ahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Jazakumullah khairan to the ICPC community and also the cair-nj folks for hosting a really important but also a really important and relevant event, especially at the time that we're in right now. A lot of people have been hearing about what's happening in the news with Congress, this really big picture of things. But let me provide a little bit of background about myself and tie it into some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So my name's Abdullah Aql. I am 20 years old. I'm a senior in college. And in 2019, I was appointed as the United States Youth Ambassador for the United Nations. And what that meant was I still represent young people all across the country, a population going a little bit over 50 million young people all across the country at the United Nations. What it means for me as a Muslim, it means that I find Muslim voices and I want to elevate them. I want to hear from the Muslims that haven't been heard from, that haven't been talked about on the national stage or even at the United Nations, even sometimes not have been talked about by Muslim countries. And so that is my job on the national level. On the local level, I work with the Muslim American Society as their public affairs and civic engagement director at Mass Staten Island, not too far from here, alhamdulillah, where we had the pleasure of having Sheikh Usama a few weeks ago. But additional to that, I also, once again, zooming out onto the national level, I also work with an organization called Empower Change, which I was happy to see on one of those slides, where we do civic engagement work like CAIR and so many other great partners. But now to jump right into that question that we had about why should I get involved? And I want to rephrase that question. I was just at the MassCon convention that was happening in Chicago a few weeks back, or what was it, a week ago. And that conversation was also being had about why do I need to get involved? About, like, let's put aside political advancements and all of that, but why do I even need to get involved in the first place? And my answer to that question is that you're involved whether you like it or not, and that's just the reality. Is that whether you choose to head to the polls or not, on the first week of June, in August, in November, you are making a choice. Whether you head to the polls or not, let's just say I choose to stay at home, I have voted. It is a vote within itself, not going to the polls. Because what that means is that the people that don't want you to vote, the people that may be Islamophobic, the people that may be voting against the Muslim community are betting on you to stay at home. And so as soon as you stay at home, that's one extra vote that they don't have to take care of. You're doing their work for them. And so right now that's my direct answer. So when you say like, oh, I don't want to go to vote, you're voting. And so what's the step after that? The step after saying, khalas, I understand that my vote, I need to vote. It's about political education, and that's what's really important. We need to understand what is politics. We need to understand the community around us. We need to understand the needs of our own community before we go out and we start voting, because no one's asking for you to go out to go vote for someone that you don't understand or you don't know their policies. Rather, we're saying it is our job as Muslims to always know what we're going to be making a decision on. Before we do anything, we always want to inform ourselves and our families and those that are around us. And so I'm going to jump right into some of the political advancements, our topic today for the Ummah in 2022, moving into 2023, and also our path moving forward. Alhamdulillah, as Sister Medina mentioned, Muslims all across the country are taking the step into going into office, being politically activated, becoming really activists and change makers within their community. The few dozen people that we saw on the screen, there's hundreds more that are in the background that are running their campaigns, that are in their social media, that are doing so many more background efforts that we might not ever see on the screen, but that's where a lot of us can be playing a role. Not necessarily do you have to win an office, run for office for you to be making change, but we can all be making change right here at the masjid, at our homes, with our neighbors. We'll be making those small impacts, those small wins that I would consider we're moving the Muslim community forward, we're moving this ummah forward, we are creating political change. And so when we talk about political change, I always go back to political science and what I'm studying right now and what I'm actually writing my thesis on, which is about the level of analysis theory. And this is jumping really hard into political science, but I'm going to zoom out right after it. The political analysis theory breaks it down to three main pieces, which is the system, the individual, and the state. Those are the three main actors when we look at anything. And so right now, if we're to look at individuals, individuals have a lot to play in this whole system. That's all of us. Individuals, people that run for office, people that stay at home, whoever you are, in the end of the day, you are an individual in this theory. Another level is the state level, which is the larger level. It could be the state of New Jersey, it could be the United States. Whatever it is, it's a little bit higher than where we all are right now. It's something that we all contribute to. And at that higher level is the system level. The system level are larger things that are going on that are really controlling the system. It's like when we ask the question, is this world leading more towards democracy, or are we leading more towards anarchy or other forms of government? And so that is more on the system level. What I want to focus on specifically is individual level, where we all have the most impact. So each and every single one of us can choose, for example, when election season comes by, to vote or not. But what's more important is when it's not voting season. What is happening right now after elections pass? Do we sit at home? Do we not choose to do anything? That's an option. But what other people are doing and what other communities are doing is mobilizing at this time. This is the time before elections that's actually more important than when the elections actually come. And the biggest thing about our Muslim communities, sometimes what we do is that we wait until 2 weeks before election. It's like, oh my God, who am I going to be voting for? And let me quickly reach out to some of my friends. Let me tell them who I'm going to be voting for. And all the time people hit me up right before like the week of elections. And they're like, Abdullah, send me a list of 5 or 10 people that I should be voting for that are on the ballot. Yes, I'll send you those people. But more importantly, I want to give you those reasons. I want you to be able to make that decision on your own because you're affecting your community. And so what's important for us to be doing right now until the next election, whether it's presidential, midterms, whatever is happening, is that we mobilize as a community. We come together and we say that these are our things that we care about as a community. Whether it could be something that is so straightforward and something that ties directly to our religion, like for example, interest-free loans. That is something that each and every single one of us can go advocate for and something that our belief tells us to advocate for. And so it's something that's no one can argue on. We should all be making a change to ensure that we all get interest-free loans. Another thing is supporting Palestine. When we see that candidates or individuals are going out and supporting on bills, funding hundreds of millions of dollars to support Israel, that is our job to say, no, we do not stand for this. That's something each and every single one of us have a religious obligation that is tied to it. And so there's so many of these topics that we go back for, and I'm remembering right now Muslim Advocacy Day that happened earlier this year with a lot of large partners like CAIR and MAS and the United States Council of Muslim Organizations, USCMO, where they came out and they did exactly that. They said, here are 3 topics that the Muslim community cares about. Let us go to DC and tell all our representatives about it. That in order for you to get the Muslim vote, you need to agree to these 3 things. And it's not only our community that's doing it. Sometimes we're like, oh, we're going to be asking for too much. We can't be doing this. These representatives don't know us. Every single community is doing this. Why? Because communities know their worth. And we should know our worth as a Muslim community because when we look at statistics, the Muslim community has power. And that power sometimes even goes back to money. We contributed more than $4 billion in charitable donations in the last year just by the Muslim community in 2022. That power, that money has power behind it. That money can elect people, can remove people from office, can support people that support our vision, and can actually remove people that don't support our vision. And so what's really important for us in that time, like I said, is to mobilize. And mobilizing just doesn't mean to just think about it and know that you're going to be greater and our community is going to be something great, but it's actually to support your mobilization by action. So you set a plan, you create action, and you say, here's what I'm going to be doing. And so, for example, I'll give you some insight on that and what I did personally that worked, alhamdulillah, in Staten Island and in other places. Is like, I said, I need to make a needs assessment. I need to know what my problems are and what my community's problems are. So specifically, let's just say, I'm going to talk about Staten Island where I'm from. And each city, each locality, each neighborhood is going to have their own issues that each and every single one of you can find out. But in Staten Island, I realized, I was like, okay, what does the Muslim community need? They have a huge food insecurity problem. People are not finding access to basic food, whether it's vegetables, healthy food, whatever it was. There was no halal option nearby. Everyone had to go to Brooklyn, which is a nearby borough. And so it was like, let's target this issue. What we did, we started reaching out to other partners. Because the most important thing about this space is that you have partners. And in the Muslim community, we all know that we are one ummah. When one part hurts, we all are hurting. And at the same time, we push each other to grow. And so automatically, I'm part of the Muslim American Society. I reached out to Islamic Relief. I was like, Islamic Relief, I know you guys have local programs going on. Do you guys have a food pantry that you guys could help us out with in Staten Island? Right away, we got the ball rolling, and now we have a food pantry every single Friday, where we have volunteers come and pack food, and they're able to come support that food insecurity problem. With every single issue, we're able to think about it through that lens. We don't have to complicate it or think about it as too many different factors, but we think about it from within our own community, and we see that the answers are almost always there. And so while we as a community can really be talking about the big picture kind of things that are happening, like right now, if you guys aren't aware, the Speaker of the House, they're working on the Speaker nomination, on who will be the Speaker of the House for the next years. And so right now, we're passing the 10th vote on who will be the next Speaker of the House. And the last time this happened, it passed the 100 votes, where they just kept going. And it's part of a bigger problem that I won't really get into. But what that means is right now, is that without a Speaker of a House, we don't have people that are sworn into Congress. Bills are put on hold. DC's City Council can't actually pass bills because they're tied to Congress. And so there's a lot of ramifications that we're going to be starting to feel in the next few months if a thing isn't going to be passed. I mean, if a speaker isn't going to get into office, including budget, which we will feel 100%. And so what I'm trying to say by this is that at every level, we will find a different roadblock, a different thing that comes our way. I work at the United Nations, and sometimes when I go in, I would feel very down that I don't see a lot of Muslims in the United Nations. And that's just the reality. Our office is in New York. I look around and there aren't a lot of Muslims. The Jum'ah prayer is limited to 3 or 4 people. And so sometimes that's something that could really bring us down. But at the same time, it gives us room for opportunity. That there are hundreds at the United Nations that have no idea about some of these fundamentals about Islam, some of the fundamentals about our community, and we have the job to go out and tell them. I have the job to go out and say, I need 45 minutes, I need 30 minutes to go pray my Jum'ah prayer. I need my 10 minutes to go pray my Dhuhr prayer. And that on its own, I would consider, is the first ability that all of us can do. Is that we all have the ability to spread Islam, and by spreading Islam, trust me, we are moving the ummah forward. We are moving politically forward. Because then they get that politics is all about narratives. Politics is all about narratives. And I always say this, because the way you are perceived is the way that people will act around you, is the way that people will vote about you. And so if people perceive the Muslim community as a dangerous community or what they see on the news, we're going to have a problem explaining ourselves, always. We're always going to feel like we're on the defensive. When in reality, if we do these small steps that are taught throughout our religion, like caring for our neighbor, or praying our salawat, very small things that we are able to do, those steps are going to be the first steps in changing the narrative of the Muslim community. And so when we get into the politics of it, there are so many different levels, as Sister Medina mentioned, that each and every single one of us can actually get involved in. It's not necessarily senator, it's not necessarily Congress, or running for president, or being part of President Biden's administration, But we all have the ability to be involved in some of the lowest levels, but you're creating major change. And I know especially in New Jersey, you guys have a lot of like smaller counties, smaller townships, and that gives you all the opportunity to do amazing things. What I mean by that is get involved with your city council, get involved with your community board, get involved with your school board. These places are where most decisions are made. Most people don't realize that, but what happens at the local level matters so much. That, for example, when we talk about what students are being taught in schools, people will have their opinions, but at the end of the day, what's happening is it all gets voted at the school board. So when Muslims aren't there to speak on the school board meeting, what happens is that whatever the other or whatever anyone else is there chooses to pass, it will pass, because we never said anything against it. Muslims' voices were never against it. And what happens is, and what I've noticed, and I was having a conversation with someone about this, is that sometimes when we're not on the table, when we're not in these conversations, people go out and represent us. People that are not Muslim will go out and say, oh, I know the Muslim community. I'll tell you what they think. And that happens a lot of the time. And so sometimes candidates will go out thinking that they have the Muslim community's vote, when the Muslim community is absolutely is completely out of the picture. And so a non-Muslim will go out and be like, yeah, I visited the mosque before. They're really kind people. They would definitely vote with this. And so people are thinking, oh, we're pushing inclusion, we're pushing diversity because we have someone that knows Muslims. When rather we have Muslims that could be in office. And that's why, honestly, I'm very proud of New Jersey for being able to have 40 representatives in office from Muslims in the last year. That is huge, because now you have people sitting on the table that are saying, actually, no, this is what the Muslim community believes in. This is what the Muslim community doesn't agree with. And with that power, we're able to move this Muslim community forward. And so when we talk about political activism, sometimes we just stop at just votes. We're like, oh, we're going to go and vote, and these votes are going to affect international policy, and we stop there. We're like, oh, that's what Congress does, that's what Senate does, that's what the Assembly does. But it's actually so much more, because behind politics is a lot of money. And it's not money, and what I mean by corrupt money, what I mean is grants, funding opportunities for our communities. And we were talking about it recently in Staten Island, where alone in each district in Staten Island, or in New York City actually, each council member has around $2 million of discretionary funding that they're allowed to spend to any nonprofits in their district. It's something that the Muslim community has not been tapping into in New York City, and only recently we're saying we need to get behind this, because it's money that goes towards building community centers, building churches, building synagogues, and things like that. And the Muslim community is like, wow, we haven't been part of this, because we've been saying we don't want to be involved in politics. When at the end of the day, this money has been going to other communities that might not be needing it the most, honestly. We know that churches all across the country have been declining, have been closing at record numbers, because people haven't been using them like how they used to. When the opposite is happening at masajid, where our masajid are really overflowing. We see ICPC, mashallah, has 3 centers, MAS has 7 centers in New York and 40 across the country. So we know that as a Muslim community, we are rapidly growing. And with that rapid growth, we need rapid resources. And those resources always tie back politically. Even Islamic Relief or some of these larger organizations are getting grants nationally from Congress, from federal levels. And so for us as a community, locally here, you can be advocating politically for funding for your masjid. It's that simple. If you don't want to advocate for anything else, go out and advocate for funding for your masjid. Go out to your local elected officials and say, my masjid has this youth program that's been going on, and we need funding for it. This is how much the fiscal year is. And obviously speak to your masjid administration, do your research, and propose it to your masjid administration. Speak to them, and funding opportunities are plentiful. And so that's one of the main ways that I would tell you, this is why we need to go vote. Aside from all these different areas that we could go, voting brings in money for our communities. Another important thing is when we talk about Muslim identity. Very recently, I would say, when Trump got elected into office in 2016, we were talking a lot about Muslims in office, but also Muslim identity. Who are we? People are speaking on our behalf, people are putting us to the other, and for a community, very naturally, we felt like we were under attack, and we were. But the reality of it is we sometimes undermine ourselves and our power as a community, and we put ourselves as just a minority, when in reality, we are just a section of a pretty large majority. Muslims almost being 2 billion of an 8 billion population is huge. We are what? The second largest religion in the world? That is absolutely that is huge. And so when we say, oh, we're just a minority, we don't have power, we are all of that, it goes back to exactly what I said. Politics is all about perception, is all about the narrative. So when we perceive ourselves as a weak community, other people are perceiving us as a weak community. And so what we have to do is show our power as a Muslim community by coming together, by saying, here are the Muslims and here's how they're voting. And this ties to one of my last and final points, is really about being this idea of a Muslim bloc all across the country. And here's the optimistic piece about all of this, is that all of us are part, naturally, since we are part of an ummah, something that is so unique to Islam. Like other religions don't have this unification piece that we have as Muslims. We're all saying, we are all pushing these same things. We all have the Quran, we all have the Sunnah, we have set guidelines to what we need to be advocating for. We don't have to guess, alhamdulillah. So what we have to do is treat ourselves exactly like that as an ummah, specifically in this country and even locally in New Jersey and even more locally in your own cities. Clifton, Patterson, each of these areas has their own concentrated Muslim community. And they have to treat themselves exactly as that, is that we are a Muslim community and here's how we're voting. And so sometimes, and when I speak to elected officials, I've worked in city council and New York State Assembly in various positions, the biggest thing is, and the biggest power that we have as a community is when we come together. When there's a vote happening in Congress, for example, that is saying, like, for example, like the Muslim ban, that says we want to ban people from 7 majority-based Muslim countries. What have we done as a Muslim community? We did petitions, we did all of that, but the strongest thing that we had is that we allied ourselves as a Muslim community. We're telling whoever is in Congress, you have 100 million Muslims, whatever, or we have a large community of Muslims, inshallah 100 million, but we have a large number of Muslims that are telling you that if you do not vote against this bill, we will be voting you out. And that's the reality. And that all happens at the local level. It doesn't happen nationally. Whoever your congressperson is, you need to find out where they're voting. Because if you find out that they're voting against your community, against your beliefs, against the Muslim community, it is all of our jobs to go out and say, you don't have our vote next time around. And trust me, that has the biggest power. Is that when we come to that representative and there's 10,000 Muslims out of 50,000 people living in your district, you're going to lose 10,000 votes unless you vote against this bill. And that is so powerful, and that is a power that the Muslim community has when we mobilize. And so when we talk about next steps moving forward, honestly, I'm extremely optimistic about the Muslim community, not only because our numbers are rising and we see Muslims running into office, but at the very least, Muslims are becoming politically activated, are becoming politically aware, that we're having conversations like this. 5 or 10 years ago, we would never have conversations like this, where we're talking about the Muslim community and next steps moving forward. But we would only be talking at a very reactive rate, as saying like, okay, here's what the Muslim community is doing, here's what just hit us right now, let's see how we could react to it quickly. Right now, we're thinking years ahead. Right now, we're saying, what do we want the Muslim community to look like in 10 years? And that's something that I want all of us to challenge ourselves with, and something that I will close off with right now, is that I want all of us to challenge ourselves, is how will I contribute to that 10-year vision for the Muslim community? Is if we're saying that we want another 100 people in office next year, if the number this year is 150, we want it to be 200, then 300. What am I doing to be part of that? It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to run to office, but what am I doing even at the local level? And I gave many examples to be part of that vision. And so Jazakumullah khairan once again to ICPC and also CAIR for providing this conversation and giving the space for it, because we need so many more conversations exactly like this. And Jazakumullah khairan once again for inviting me. We'll be happy to take some questions.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdullah. So a couple questions came in, and some of them are related to some of the topics that you just covered. One question is in regards to how does somebody get involved and take part in politics if there isn't really a party that is completely aligned with Muslims' beliefs and values. So oftentimes the person was saying that they have to sacrifice our core values to fit in. So if you could talk about a little bit about, when you do register to vote, you have to register either as a Democrat or a Republican, but as a Muslim, we don't agree with some of the kind of, I guess you can kind of, the agenda that each party is pushing. So how can we take part in politics when there is kind of this, I guess, misalignment, if you could say that?
So this is a very real question. Like, being very honest, like, we need to be answering these questions, and we can't be going around them for too long, because sometimes we're just like, oh, just go out and get involved, and we don't talk about these questions, but it's very important, it's very real. And the biggest thing that I always fall back on is, obviously, and a lot of people always hear this, is the lesser of two evils. And you always, and it goes back to my first point that I said all the way in the beginning, is political education. Is that if each one of us do the homework, I promise you, if you set a pro and con list for each party, for each candidate, for whatever it is, you will find on your own the answer. They both have, like both representatives always, both parties have their websites where they very plainly put out what they believe. One party says this, the other party says this, national security, X, Y, and Z. None of the day, you're all able to put out your own belief based on that, based on Republican or a Democrat. Obviously, it's not the best case, like compared to other countries that have multiple different parties and you're able to pick a little bit something closer to exactly what you believe in. Here we only have two main parties that predominantly win. But what we could do as a community, and this was tying to what I said later on, is that when we all somewhat agree on general principles, like for example, if we've had a Democrat in office that has been supporting our beliefs for a long time, and I'm going to say this very straightforward. If you have a Democrat in office that has been supporting our beliefs for a really long time, and then we have a Republican that is coming in and is saying that they're going to support the Muslim ban, is saying Islamophobic rhetoric, regardless, Democrat or Republican, you should not be voting for that candidate. And so it's very important for us when we look at the area around us, when we look at New Jersey, wherever it is all around us, who is saying this Islamophobic rhetoric? Which party is it? And I don't have to answer that question because a lot of you guys know the answer to that question. Who is putting out Islamophobic rhetoric? Who is constantly on the back of the Muslim community, whether it's ID cards or whatever it is? And that on its own should be answering your question on saying who is the closest. You might not agree 100%, but who is the closest that I could be at least part of to grow the Muslim power in this country? And Sister Medina.
Brother Abdullah. This is a very great question, and I want us to be careful as a ummah to not fall into the trap of being left-leaning or right-leaning, conservative or liberal. We have to always understand that Islam is perfect, right? Our deen is perfect, alhamdulillah, and we are the religion of the middle path, right? So we are not a religion that is squarely cookie-cutter Republican or squarely cookie-cutter Democratic. Again, I want to reiterate that CAIR is a 501c3 organization, so we don't align with any political party. And we also have to understand as Ummah, right? We are not monolithic, right? So we have people who fall on all spectrums of the political aisle. We have people who fit into one aisle and a person who fits into a different aisle. But we have to do our best to not fall into the rhetoric of are we left, are we right? Because even on some of the most politically charged issues of today's day and age, we see that Islam has a specific answer to it. We don't necessarily fall squarely into the Democratic camp or the Republican camp on specific issues, so we have to always bring it back to Islam, right? And as Brother Abdullah said, sometimes you do have to choose who is the best of the two candidates. And it's not always ideal, but we do live in the real world. And sometimes it does come down to that. But it is very important for us to always strive to support candidates, not just because they come from communities that look like us or they look like us, but because their policies are good for us. There's a phrase, a popular phrase that many people use. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with it, but not all skin folk are kinfolk. So you have to be very careful about who you're voting for and do the research. So that's a very great question. May Allah make it easy for us, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. So just to keep on this subject, because we're getting a couple more questions on this. So how can we protect our rights? So even though we are it's not a cookie cutter. We can't say we are completely Democratic or Republican. How can we protect our rights so that we don't fall into something that will be considered problematic from an Islamic standpoint? So just to give an example, if we are going to be advocating for someone who's running for office who is a Democrat, and they have certain beliefs which are aligned with the Muslim community. However, they're also pushing their LGBTQ agenda, right? And we as Muslims don't want to support that, I would say, directly, because that's problematic from our standpoint. So is there a way for us to protect our rights and our beliefs while still voting for a certain individual?
That is a very great question, and that is exactly the times that we're living in. And again, as a ummah, we have to understand that our deen is about justice, right? We are not about oppressing people of any kind. Now, we can always stand firm in our Islamic beliefs and stand firm in what the Sunnah says and what the Quran says, but we have to also understand that political candidates are not only beholden to just our community, they're beholden to various different communities. So we have to work with them to work on issues that benefit us, and sometimes there is going to have to be compromise, but we can be very straightforward and honest about what it is that we can and cannot compromise on as individuals and as a community. However, as a community and as a ummah, we should never be complicit in the oppression and subjugation of any groups of people. We can respectfully disagree with people's lifestyle choices, but we should always stand on the side of justice and letting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judge those communities who are engaging in behaviors or activities that goes against the beliefs of our deen. But it is difficult. It really is difficult, but this is why political education is important, and you have to look at where candidate stands on every single issue, not just the select hot button topic issues.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add on a little bit to that, I think what we need to notice right now is that we don't want to compromise in 10, 15 years. Because in 10, 15 years, if we're on track like how we are right now, we won't have to compromise. We will believe exactly like how we believe right now. And candidates, people that are running for office, know that if I'm not in line with the Muslim community's beliefs, I'm not winning. That's just the reality. If we don't want LGBTQ ideas to be taught in schools, we show ourselves as a Muslim community that is large enough for candidates to not align with that. And so that is what we are really pushing for right now, is that we know that in the next 5 or 10 years, we will have to compromise. 5 or 10 years will pass, but we no longer will have to compromise, and every single community has went through it. Every community that has many people in office, whether they're minority or not, they had to go through a period where they understood that in order to grow, in order to reach that stage, we are going to make some compromises. Not compromises in the sense that we are compromising our deen, but we are going to be leaning towards candidates that, like I said, are lesser of two evils or are siding with us to the majority. And what we're hoping is in 5, 10 years, as our Muslim community continues to grow, as our numbers, and we're showing our numbers, continues to grow, and this is a very important point, is that we're only able to show our numbers by registering to vote. That's all they look at. That what you could say that your population, like Patterson can say that we have tens of thousands of Muslims. And at the end of the day, if they're not registered to vote, that's all that's going to be showing on paper. And so when you go out and register to vote, you're already putting that number up for the Muslim community one level. 5 or 10 years from right now, we're able to go up to candidates, Muslim candidates or not, and say that in order to get our vote, this is what it is. And we won't even have to be able to go up to candidates anymore. Candidates will come up to us and say, what are your beliefs as a Muslim community? And just to quickly add on very quickly, I had an endorsement meeting with a candidate in Staten Island this was in November. And when we were sitting down, very bluntly, I was sitting down with the executive director for Mass Staten Island, myself, and a few others. And she was saying, what does the Muslim community believe in? She knew that she needed the Muslim community because we have around 10,000 Muslims living in just that district. I told her that this is what the Muslim community believes in. Number one, we need funding for our center. We have programs that are going on. We need funding. Number two, we cannot have X, Y, and Z be taught in schools. Why? Because these are our beliefs. It's not something that I have to justify to you. Just like how the Christian community, the Jewish community, other faith communities are very proud and they very straightforward say their beliefs. Why aren't we doing that as a Muslim community? And so very proactively say that these are my beliefs. I don't have to justify why I fast in Ramadan. I don't have to justify why I pray 5 times a day. Neither do I have to justify why X, Y, and Z should not be taught in schools. And so candidates will actually, at some level, will start respecting that. Because the only point in time where candidates don't start respecting that is when we start flip-flopping. When one community says, oh, we'll let you, like we're cool with that. The other community says, no, we're not standing for that. But when we all say that this is what we're not standing for, this is what we are standing for, this is what the deen says, we will be starting, that 5 to 10 years will start getting less and less. And inshallah, in the next few years, we won't have to compromise anymore.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, now we're going to ask a specific hot topic question. Someone is asking and stating that marijuana is now legalized in New Jersey, which is harming our community. How can we vote in New Jersey for a governor or senator or any political official to advocate against this?
That is a good question. And I always like to bring it back to the topic of intersectionality. So we have to start from what the issue is at its core. Now, the United States has a history of, subjugating specific communities for specific types of offenses when other communities engage in similar behavior. As a Black Muslim, our communities, Black American communities, Black communities, POC communities have historically been destroyed by the war on drugs, over-policing, and various different types of, criminalization. So we have to be mindful that a lot of the policies that are happening in place isn't in place to necessarily harm the youth or in place to necessarily create avenues for youth to engage in illicit behaviors, but it's creating avenues to rectify past injustices done to historically marginalized communities. So when you see things like legalization, there's a two-front conversation. It is valid that we have to be mindful that we do not want our children and we do not want our community impacted by substance abuse, because substance abuse is a problem nationwide, and we have our Sunnah and our Quran that tells us clearly what is halal and what is haram, right? However, we also have to understand about the legal matters and the political implications of specific laws and how that has negatively impacted specific communities historically. So it is a very tough conversation to tread, but this is why when you are voting for candidates, you have to understand to what degree do they support decriminalization of illicit substances, right? There are different spectrums. You have people who are completely decriminalize everything and everything is a free-for-all, and then you have folks who are trying to do reparative and restorative and transformative justice measures to make up for the years that our fellow Muslim brothers and sisters and fellow communities have been, over-policed, criminalized, and thrown into the carceral state. So it is a very challenging topic, but it is all coming back down to political education and really understanding what it is that the candidate is advocating for, and then making it our duty as a community to try to put some safeguards and safety rails in place. As you know, New Jersey makes it illegal for those who are under 21 years old to be able to access those specific substances. So putting specific safeguards in place like that will make it so that children and youth and teenagers are not being able to access that substance. So may Allah make it easy for us.
Jazakallah khair. You talked about intersectionality. So one question came up in regards to as far as Arab American and Muslim American policy issues. Do you see those as topics that are intersectional, or they're separate when you're doing kind of advocacy at a national or state or local level?
That's a great question, and it's completely intersectional. I don't want to use this example as like, just a cliche example, but the Palestinian struggle for liberation, for example, that struggle is very, very, very much intersected to various different other communities. And if folks are not aware, there were, Palestinian advocates and activists actually talking to Black Lives Matter activists and advocates during the height of protests in this country, telling them how to, wash your eyes when you get pepper sprayed, or, how to, not, be detained and things of that nature. So as a ummah, like Brother Abdullah said, we are one. It's very important that we do not divide ourselves. As, our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, there is no advantage of an Arab over a black person or a black person over an Arab and vice versa. We are all one ummah, and we all need to stick together and fight for one another for the sake of Allah and for the sake of our deen, because at the end of the day, Islam ties us all together, and all these issues affect us collectively.
Yeah, definitely. Just to add on to that, and when I think about intersectionality, like the first thing that comes to mind is that ayah in Surah Al-Hujurat that says وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, that we have made you different tribes and groups of people so you guys can get to know each other. And so for us, that intersectionality, that us being, like for example, if I were to say I am Egyptian, I am Muslim, I am American, I'm from Staten Island, there's so many different intersections, but that on its own can be a benefit for our Muslim community. When we think about it more in that unified space, rather than saying, okay, I am an Egyptian, I won't be supporting another person's struggle. But it's more about interconnected struggles. What are the struggles that are connecting all of us? If my Muslims are hurting in Palestine, the Uyghur Muslims are also hurting, people in another country are hurting, there is a unity towards all of that where we are able to come together and unify our struggles towards an oppressor, towards someone that is oppressing our community, committing injustice towards it. And so we could think about that even on the local level or even here in the United States, not necessarily on the national level, where we're saying that if we have multiple different communities living, for example, in New Jersey, that's a Palestinian community, that's another community, we should be able to come together and say, here's what we agree on. Let's stop focusing on our differences and let's focus on our similarities. Let's stop saying that this is what they've been doing for so many years, we don't like how they've been doing X, Y, and Z, and let's say that we are Muslims at the end of the day and here's how we're going to be moving forward. And so that's very important for our Muslim community when we think about the long run, when we think about that 10-year vision. We need to think about how we could come together as a Muslim community on our similarities, rather than really pinpoint and find that needle in a haystack and say, oh no, we don't support that other community because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
The United States had the votes to talk about somebody else. Ukraine opened the crusaders big time.
So yeah, I think that's a very important question. It's very real, like what I'm saying, and that's why I really enjoy this conversation, because we're getting to very real questions that are in our community. We're not going around it. And so for myself, I always think that there's two forms to politics and being a change maker. And aside from going to the United Nations, aside from working with some of these organizations, I think of myself as like, I need to go down to the streets sometimes. Sometimes when our black brothers and sisters are being oppressed, I need to go down and protest. And same thing with Palestine, I need to go down and protest. But it's more than just protesting. It's doing an action behind that protesting. When we talk about Palestine and the issues around Palestine, every single Muslim should be participating in BDS, in ensuring that we are divesting from Israeli products. You cut their money, you're able to cut their influence. But I'm gonna get to more of that. Every single year, the United States is giving more than $300 million every single year to Israel. From not just on the federal level, on the local level in New York in specific, so much money is going to Israel. What I'm able to do about that is that I'm able to influence lawmakers' decision. At the end of the day, that budget that gets passed is passed by lawmakers that all of us elect. That is 100%. The president does not have the power to do that on his own, and if he thinks he has the power, Congress can stop him. And so each and every single one of us has a power to play with that budget that gets put out every single year, whether it's to Ukraine, to Israel, to Egypt, to any country. We have a say about that. And so, for example, when people say that they don't want to vote, and it was the first thing that I was saying, when you say that you don't want to vote, then you're okay with that money, your taxpayer dollars, being sent overseas to kill our brothers and sisters. And that's just the reality of it. Like, I'm not saying this to exaggerate, but that's really the reality of it. Our taxpayer dollars are the ones that are going overseas to support missile systems and things like that that are killing our brothers and sisters. And so what we have to do as a community is go up to these lawmakers and say, you don't have our vote. And the more we are able to do that, the more people will notice that you support this, then you're supporting something that is killing communities. And you pull the humanitarian factor in it. And the reality of it is, it's been working. 10 years ago, the conversation about Palestine would never come up in Congress. It was always, we have to support Israel. Why? To maintain regional security in the Middle East. It was just straightforward as that. Only recently are we hearing Congress people and lawmakers go up and say, what is happening in Israel isn't humanitarian, or what's happening in Palestine isn't humanitarian. And that's a big win for our community. And so taking that win but amplifying it, just to your saying, we don't want to stop there. We can never be comfortable as a Muslim community until we get exactly what we want, until Palestine is free, until we don't have dictators in office back home in our countries, until Muslims and Muslim brothers and sisters living here in this country, people of color, are comfortable to walk out in the streets anywhere in the country and anywhere across the world. And so to continue to advocate for that on the lawmaker level, through budgets, through things like that, is the biggest step. And I always remember, and sorry I'm taking a long time, but I always remember, and I go back to this, and I was at a conference in DC a few weeks ago, where actually Sister Linda Sarsour was saying this. She was saying you will find two people. You'll find the Malcolm X's of communities and Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King needed Malcolm X just like how Malcolm X needed Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was having those tough conversations with some of these lawmakers, people sitting on the table, making sure of that, but at the same time, MLK was going down in the streets and saying, I'm disrupting this. This is not how I'm happy. And we as Muslims have the opportunity to do both in the day and age that we live in. We have the freedom in this country to go out and say exactly what we support for. And that's a huge thing that other countries back home, where I'm from in Egypt, I can't say that. I can't support a dictatorship. I can't do any of that. And if I do stand up against it, I'll get sent in jail. So here, the most powerful thing that we have is our voices. And following our voices is our vote. And that's where I'm going to stop.
I was going to add on to Brother Abdullah's point, I think it's also important to tackle organizations that help fund conflicts and organizations that are complicit in the subjugation of our community. You know, you have organizations like the ADL, you have Zionist organizations who are pumping money into, you know, politicians' pockets to get them to support detrimental policies in order for these types of occurrences to continue to be a reality. So we also have to get to the root cause of exposing who these people are who are funding these conflicts, who are funding war, who are funding weapons, and who have a vested interest in continuing to have conflict occur. When you get to the root cause of that as well, you're able to help stop the problem. We are now in a time and day and age where, you know, it is acceptable now to criticize organizations like the ADL without being called anti-Semitic, right? It is now, you know, you're able to talk about the Zionism in Palestine without being called anti-Semitic. Now we're able to educate the community about what actual anti-Semitism is and what a critique of, you know, oppression and what, like, you know, war crimes are. So it's a lot of different work that needs to be done. We have to talk to lawmakers, we have to educate them, we have to expose, you know, those who are invested in the subjugation and oppression of people. We have to, you know, engage in communication strategies and media, and we've seen a lot of it. Social media has been a great tool to, you know, bring attention to all the different detrimental elements that are being occurring on the, you know, national stage that for many years, many people didn't even know about. So it is definitely something that has gotten better. There's still so much more work to be done. And inshallah, Palestine will be free.
Jazakallah khair. I think just given the time, I think this is a good time for us just to end this. But I just do want to add that there is going to be, inshallah, a part 2 of this topic that talks about the religious duty to vote, the consequences of elections. So inshallah, we can talk a little bit more about this, you know, this passionate subject of Palestine and some of the other issues. So, and you can also take their contact information as well to discuss as well. But I just want to thank again, Jazakumullah khair, to our esteemed guest. MashaAllah, this was a very informative and an educational session. Jazakumullah khair again for coming to inform us about this topic. This was really good. Jazakumullah khair everyone for attending. Like I did mention, inshallah we are going to have a part 2. The date hasn't been finalized, but please look for it. And as discussed, inshallah we will have the Friday forums. We'll continue to have those on a weekly basis on Friday nights. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Amazing. Alhamdulillah. This was really great. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Very, very great. Thank you so much. Hi, how are you? Let me take my microphone off before. I'll be